Welcome to the December 7th, 2012 edition of the Show with No Name. I'm Bob Going with Jim Nikosha on my right, Gavin Murdoch on my left. And today is, of course, a famous day in history. Why am I looking at you? This is the only guy who remembers it. What do you remember?
I was 10 years old.
Yeah?
11 years old, I guess.
All right.
I don't remember that much, except I'm trying to remember if they ran down the street with newspapers or whether somebody was out there. You know,
You were in Gloversville at the time,
I was in
right?
Gloversville, yeah. There's a Leader Herald. You know, there's not that much to remember. At 10 years old, you know, nothing made any sense to me back then. And it doesn't make much sense to me today either.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, does it, really? When you get right down to it, it really doesn't. I suppose if...
day in infamy. Yeah.
Yeah, if they did...
That was the greatest generation's 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there were like 27, 28 Amsterdamians in the greater Pearl Harbor area that day in the service. And I think the only one left is Paul Lazaro.
That's what I heard on the radio today.
Yeah. Of course, the first guy from Amsterdam was killed the first day, Bill Hasenfuss, William Hasenfuss Jr.
He was working at Higham Field, right?
Higham Field. He was, none of the newspaper accounts gave any indication as to what happened to him, but, and neither did the family know, but years later, his brother Ed met a guy who had written a book about his experiences that day, and he was in the same unit with Bill Hasenfuss, and it's included in his book. Although he doesn't say who it is, he just says my friend in relation to it. But he told Ed that this was about Bill. So what happened was
what branch was he in?
He was in the
Army
Air Corps. Army Air Corps. He was a mechanic. He used to hang out at the Perth airport and fly planes and fix planes when he was in high school. He graduated in '39 from high school. But contrary to all the recorder stories of the time, he waited a full year before joining up for his two friends, Paul Lazaro and Ray Brooks, to go in together. So the three of them went in together. They all ended up going to Hawaii. You know, we're all there. You know, nicer. They were out there in paradise.
Yeah.
What a cushy assignment, huh? You got to be in the service. There are a lot of worse places to be than paradise, right?
For a short time, it was a paradise.
Yeah. So they all went in June or 1st of July, 1940. And so they'd been in Hawaii probably 7-8 months before Pearl Harbor.
What was the length of their enlistment when they went in?
How
many years did they sign up for when they went in?
I think it was 4.
I don't even think it was that many back then. It was probably 3 years. And of course, the guys who were drafted in 1940, in November of 1940, the first draftee was John Armstrong Sr. Remember Johnny in my class?
Yeah, he's a cousin. I'm related to the Armstrongs.
You're related to the Armstrongs?
Yeah.
Oh, I think we've probably been through this, but go ahead, tell us again.
I'm related to the Armstrongs.
Okay. On the Armstrong side?
On the Armstrong side, on the Coker side, my grandmother's side of the family.
I worked with an Armstrong in a fire department.
That's his brother, another brother.
He lived up on Van Dyke Avenue.
Bill, they both did. Yeah, they lived next door to each other on Van Dyke.
And they married twins.
The lot there.
That's a big lot.
The lot there was my great-great-grandfather Going's farm. For a while. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. That was in some of the old deeds. It's referred to as the Going lot.
The Going lot.
Yeah.
Huh.
And if you go straight up my street here, straight up George Street, it becomes University.
Yeah.
You go up to the end of University, and there's a dead end at Wilkes.
Yeah.
And the fence there.
That's the back end of it.
That's the back end of it.
Yeah.
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 So there were like, I don't know, the first draft group was like 12, 13 guys. Bob Conover was one of them from Sealy Conover Company. Cliff Gaskins, who was one of the Amsterdam boxers, was one of them. And those two guys got put in charge. They were made temporary officers to take charge of the group on the train when they went to Camp Upton. Conover because he was like a businessman, and Gaskins because he was could keep them in line.
He's a big guy. Yeah.
Gaskins was actually one of the first guys who died, but by truck flipped over in North Carolina. You know, young, healthy, strong, top-notch boxer, one of the best boxers around, and just snuffed out, and then Army truck flips over. Huh?
It happens.
It happened a lot. So anyway, of the first 12 guys, most of all but Armstrong were actually volunteers for the draft. In other words, the draft board met their quota with the guys who were going to sign up anyway. So it wasn't much of a draft when you got right down to it. These guys were all going into service. The Selective Service Board took credit for it, and the only real draftee was John Armstrong, and they were drafted for 1 year of military service.
So by the time they got done with boot training and a couple
time to go home,
on the
right?
track, they're out of there.
They were going to be out of there, right? The notice of John Armstrong being discharged from the service was in the paper on September 9th, 1945, a week after the Battleship Missouri surrender. Yeah.
Yeah.
He went in for a year and was there for the entire World War II.
Yeah. Duration.
Yeah, and I guess of that group, there's one guy still alive up in Gloversville or Johnstown. He either just wrote a book or his daughter just wrote about him or something, because Bob Cudmore had something on him last year, I guess. And I haven't got in touch with him. I really should. You know, I'm so busy writing my book that I'm missing all these guys who
What was his name? Do you remember his name?
No, but he's in the picture. Maybe I'll put it in over my head when I edit this. Yeah. So one of the guys at Pearl Harbor was Eugene Longinus, who was in the Navy. He was on board the USS Helena. And the Helena, let's see if I get this right. The Helena was not very lucky that day because they were parked in the berth usually reserved for the USS Pennsylvania, I believe, or North Carolina. I think it was Pennsylvania. Might have been North Carolina, or it might have been neither. And so the Japanese pilots, who of course had been who had been going over and over and over and over and over their photographs of Pearl Harbor, you know. One of them's assigned to sink the battleship, and the battleship was a destroyer. But they got hit, but they managed to stay afloat and were back in service in short order. But they later were sunk off of New Guinea, I believe, or New Britain, one of those. And there were two guys from Amsterdam on board this ship. One was Longinus, and the other, I forget the guy's name. Might be over my head right now as we speak. And for some of those guys, the adventure of surviving the sinking was more of a heroic story than anything they'd done in battle. And the other guy, who's not Longinus, was with a group that floated to the nearest island and couldn't help it because they were caught by the current.
Yeah.
And they know they're heading right into Japanese territory. You know, at one point they're actually they can actually see these guys waiting for them to come in to float to shore. And somehow they managed to avoid them, or they had enough guns on them that were working that they managed to scare them off, and they got inland and held out for a few days while one of their officers swims out to the coral reef and managed to get a hold of the destroyer. I guess they were friendly natives with a radio. That's what it was. So he went out to meet the destroyer, who comes in uncharted waters and rescues them. And Longinus was in the water for like 4 hours before getting picked up. And the story of the two of them appears in the recorder simultaneously in the same article. And people were, proclaiming Longinus the hero surviving the USS Helena sinking in it, and that's when he wrote that great letter to the United's PX.
Yeah.
Where I'm no hero, the other guys are real heroes. I'm not. I was on board a good ship with good men, and blah blah blah. Yeah, bull crap. He was no hero. Yeah. I'm writing now about Guadalcanal, and it's a very interesting battle. There's some very good documentaries available on YouTube about it too. So I actually got and I've been reading a book about it. So I think I got a pretty good grasp of at least the naval part of it. We had a couple of super duper heroes in the Marines on board that, and but I hadn't realized the strategic importance of it till looking into it in the last week.
When you look at the map of the Pacific, it's even though you see how everything is, it's hard to envision why somebody would think that place is important. Why don't you just go around it and go someplace else?
Right.
Of course you can't, because you gotta.
Well,
cut off your supply lines.
Actually, there was a big debate about that at the time, and I've got to get out my MacArthur and reread that, because he was a critic of the battle for Guadalcanal. Guadalcanal was brutal. That battle went on. This is one where the Japs actually fought back, where they sent reinforcements in at night. As soon as the sun went down, the destroyers had come in to land more men, and the Marines were actually outnumbered on Guadalcanal for much of the battle. But it went on from August of 42 to February of 43. And there were 7 major naval engagements around Guadalcanal during that time period, in addition to them fighting on the ground.
They looked at it as the linchpin. If that goes.
Yeah. So here's the strategy. Here's what happened. Guadalcanal is at the end of the Solomon Islands, which kind of poke into the area of the Pacific between Australia and New Zealand. Okay. And the Japanese had moved down as far as New Guinea and were threatening Port Moresby on the British side of the Papua New Guinea, and that was a threat to Australia. I mean, the plan was to knock out Australia was the last place of resistance. That's where MacArthur was gathering his troops to come back. Now, the Japanese had, by this time, had captured everything in a huge arc centered in Japan that stretched across the Pacific and down past Guadalcanal into the Dutch East Indies and Indochina and all that stuff. And Guadalcanal, at this tip of the curve here, was in a position where it could harass the supply lines. The supply lines to Australia ran all the way from the west coast of the United States, like 6,000 or 7,000 miles, looped around, took a big deep dip south, and looped around New Zealand and hit Australia from the south. Now, when the Japanese started building the airfield on Guadalcanal, that's when the Americans said, we've got to stop this, because if they establish an airfield there where their bombers can hit the supply lines to Australia, we're screwed. We got nothing left to, or either that or we got to go by way of Antarctica or something.
Yeah, that wasn't going to work.
So that's when they decided to go after there. Now, within the airfield was not completed when we invaded, and by the second day of the battle, the Marines had captured what they renamed Henderson Field after a Marine pilot who had been killed at the Battle of Midway. And so Henderson Field was promptly. Now they went in on the 7th, captured the field on the 9th. And I was just studying this before you guys got here. Most everything I've read has said that the field was open on August 20th, which was only less than two weeks after they took it, or 11 days after they took it. I just saw a contemporaneous account of an Amsterdam guy, which seemed to indicate that the first plane landed on August 12th, which was 3 days after they took it.
Well, he filled in some of the craters and made it usable.
Now, for the next 6 months, or however many months are between August and February, Henderson Field was the epicenter of everything that was going on. The Japanese kept trying to retake Henderson Field. Their bombers kept bombing Henderson Field. Their Navy was designed to shut off Henderson Field, because once we had Henderson Field, all of a sudden, instead of the Japanese having a spot to destroy our supply lines, we have a spot where we can continuously harass the rest of the whole Solomon Island chain and putting their forces in New Guinea at risk, which is ultimately what happened. So they know in Tokyo how important this is, and they send fleet after fleet, and they had what they called the Tokyo Express running the supplies at night down the slot. The Solomon Islands kind of run in parallel, and the channel runs between them, or among them. So the first plane, whether it's August 12th or August 20th, the first plane to land at Henderson Field of 20 Marine planes, Marine fighters that came off of one of the carriers, was carried the Marine commander of the operation, Alexander Vandergrift, who later became Commandant of the Marine Corps. Piloting the plane was William Sampson of Amsterdam, New York, a veteran of Pearl Harbor. Yeah.
Got a lot of connections out there.
Yeah. Now, I'm out running errands yesterday, thinking about this, because I was just about to write about it, and my wife needed something. So I'm thinking about it as I'm driving around, and it occurs to me that the taking of Henderson, the landing of that plane at Henderson Field, marks the real turning point of the war in the Pacific. From that point onward, the Japanese were rolled back.
They were on the defense.
They were on the defense, and we were on the offense for the rest of the war. They didn't grab another inch of territory for the rest of the war, and our setting up that base was the first strike back, where we actually took back something that they had already taken. And the guy from Amsterdam, New York, was a guy who started the war.
Started the offensive.
Isn't that something?
When we were at St. Mary's, we used to have Scholastic book service. We used to go order books.
Right.
The very first book I ever ordered was Guadalcanal Diary.
Is that right?
And I can remember reading that, and I love to read, but there's only a couple things in my life I've ever read more than once, and that's one of them.
And I never have, which I think I better do before I finish this part.
I just, I read it, and my dad had been in the Navy, so I could ask questions about the Navy and stuff on there, what their role and everything, but it was just, I was mesmerized by it, and I always tried to buy any book I could about or the Civil War or the Revolution after that. Really kind of got me hooked in history, because it was...
You know what was really great for me? My mother was the English teacher, okay?
Yeah.
And as the teacher, for every book that a kid bought, she received the credit for getting books for herself. So we had bookshelves full of those Scholastic books, and really good titles that we grew up on, and never cost us a dime.
Yeah.
But then, what did we pay? 50 cents, 35 cents, something like
Yeah,
that for the
35,
paper.
50 cents.
Yeah, 35 cents for a paperback.
And I'd want to order 4 or 5 books right then. You know.
Well, of course, you can get my murder mystery for 99 cents on Kindle. The Eagle has landed. Just go to Amazon.com and get the Kindle version. Have it downloaded directly in under a minute, and you can read it. 99
But
cents.
you have to have a Kindle to start with.
Well, you have to. Well, no, actually, you don't. You can download it to your computer as well with the Kindle app for your computer, or you can download it to your smartphone if you have a Kindle app. My daughter did that. She downloaded it for her smartphone. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, she hasn't read it, but she downloaded
She's got it,
Yeah,
just in case. Gets stuck in traffic sometimes. All set.
Oh no! You know what she downloaded the free first chapter. That's what she didn't even pay the 99 cents. I didn't even get 30 cents out of the deal.
She wanted to make sure she liked it.
Jeepers.
Wow.
She's got her own hardcover copy. I don't think any of my kids have actually read my.
Really?
No?
No, I keep giving them these books when I write them, and they never read them. It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, back to Guadalcanal, since we're talking World War II. This will be our World War II edition here. The second hour, we'll get into all the local politics and stuff. By the way, I didn't notice when we started this show, did you?
No, I didn't.
Yeah,
I'll notice what time it is now.
And my timer went slamming on the floor when I moved the studio lights. Okay. They land on August 7th. Actually, they land on a couple of smaller islands around Guadalcanal, but the main force lands on August 7th. And then they start on everything, the usual sort of thing. It's their first amphibious operation of the war, really, because this comes just before the North African invasions, and there isn't, and even if it was simultaneous, they didn't have enough experience to share the what goes wrong. So they start landing supplies on the beach. And the Navy figures the Marines will unload the supplies. They're delivering them, and the Marines will unload them. Marines figure, hell no, we're here to fight. You guys unload the supplies. So before long, there's a total jam up on the beach while the Marines are moving in. Yeah, but they never thought about it ahead of time. That's what,
Yeah.
One assumes the other's doing it, but the Marines had a point.
They were the point.
Yeah, they were. We're here to seize territory. So anyway, the warhead. The invasion takes the Japanese by surprise, but some things. We had certain advantages because we had cracked the Japanese code, right?
Yeah, we knew.
However, the Japanese changed the code just before Guadalcanal. And the cryptographers hadn't figured out the new code yet. So we went a little bit blind into it. And they're still trying to destroy our aircraft carriers after Midway. Mm-hmm. And we've got, I forget what was down there, the Enterprise and the Lexington, I think. Or did the Lexington get sunk at Midway? Which one got sunk, Lexington or Yorktown? Yorktown got sunk. So the Lexington and the Enterprise are down there off in the woods outside of Guadalcanal. And the Japs are just, because the Japanese Navy guy in charge was the second in command at Midway and Pearl Harbor, I guess, and he's ready to finish off what he started after they got clobbered at Midway. But anyway, the aircraft carriers get fidgety. I think Fletcher is the admiral in charge of the carrier fleet, and he decides to pull the carriers out rather than get caught. And when the carriers pull out, it leaves we've lost the air cover for the unloading of the supplies, and all we've got is cruisers and destroyers out there with nothing to fight back from the Japanese air power. So they start getting harassed by the Japanese planes, and they decide to pull out. And the plan is they're gonna leave on August 9th. And in fact they do. leaving the Marines alone with half their supplies, you know, with no support, and just the Marines were landed, or you're on your own until we get this figured out. During the night of August 8th, the Japanese fleet comes sailing down the Slot, and this is just one of those things where everything that can go wrong does go wrong for us. They're actually spotted by some of MacArthur's planes who are covering the west end of this route, and the pilots never bothered to report it till like 6 hours later when they land. And then nobody knows where they are, and then it gets routed like 8 different ways by way of I think San Diego back to Pearl Harbor, and by way of Australia and New Zealand before it finally gets. So it's like something like 16 hours go by before the notice that the bombers saw this.
Oh, by the way, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, and then they weren't very clear on what exactly it was they saw. So that's awful. Now, the Navy has set up a defensive pattern around Guadalcanal, where they got a southern group and a northern group around Savo Island. It might be pronounced Sabo because it's Spanish, but which is off of Guadalcanal, and so they've got these destroyers all night long that are crisscrossing the area back and forth going this way. And then they got a fleet down here and a fleet up, over here on either side of Savo Island. The Japanese come sailing down the Slot at night, at midnight.
Right after everybody crossed.
The destroyers had just crisscrossed, and they sailed right through without being detected whatsoever. And they come first to the southern group, which is now without its admiral, because the admiral has been called to a meeting with Turner and Fletcher to discuss how come the aircraft carriers are leaving, right? And nobody's in charge. The admiral who's supposed to be in charge of both groups is away, and has left nobody behind to
run the ship.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they got guys running the ship, but not to running the overall campaign. So the Japanese come in unopposed, and they immediately sink there's 3 cruisers in each group and a bunch of destroyers. So they sink one of the cruisers, destroy another one, then they turn north to the north group, pitch black, and they catch all 3 cruisers, the Quincy, the Astoria, and the Vincennes. And just at one point they put their searchlight on, and I think it was I'm not sure the Vincennes or the Astoria or the Quincy, one of those, and it lights them up, and they figure it's their own guys coming through and checking to see if there's any enemy there. All their guns are pointed towards shore, away from
the action.
The action. And all of a sudden, so the captain of the ship says, signal them, we're friendly, turn your light off. Well, 18 minutes it took to sink the Vincennes. 18 minutes. And Michael Kwiatkowski from Amsterdam was on board the Vincennes. The book I'm reading about that battle is just brutal. I mean, it got into really good detail, talking to the survivors about everything that was happening. You know,
it was good.
All 3 ships were. These cruisers in those days carried float planes, biplanes, and amidships below deck, I guess, and then they would have 3 on each cruiser with catapult launches. I mean, we're talking, you know, like practically Wright brothers planes here, but they would shoot them off with a catapult. I don't know how the hell they landed. I guess they landed in the water and they hoisted them up. Then they hoisted them back up. And their job was just to, you know, fly around and see if there's anything nearby that should be bothering us. So anyway, these things are made of canvas, and everyone is burned to a crisp. And when they hit the Japanese are all armed with torpedo ships, which we didn't have at that time, and the torpedoes just destroy these 3 cruisers. I mean, it's just hell. So we lost 5 cruisers out of the 6 out of commission as a result of that. Now,
Did you ever talk to Ray Kasuba?
no. Yes, tell me.
Well, no, because his ship was hit, and he was in the water for quite a while before rescue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I never heard the whole story, but I knew that he was in the water.
Well, just imagine. This is what I was reading just before you guys got here. Just imagine what it must have been like. They're in the pitch dark. They're ordered to abandon ship. I think that they actually recovered something like 600 guys from the Vincennes. I don't know how many were killed. Burning oil and everything else, and
Their prospects aren't very
shark-infested waters. Are just told to go over the side, and then they slowly group up. And again, it's these major currents are taking them in this direction, and they're afraid that they're going to be drawn. The Astoria was in total flames. The other 2 ships just went down quickly, but the Astoria burned for a long time, and they're just terrified that they're going to be drawn right into the fire from the current, or the sharks are going to get them, or it's so dark, and they know the Japanese are everywhere that they at first they used their whistles and started shouting, and the officers told them cut it out because you don't know if the guy who hears you is going to be the guy who shoots you at that point. So basically, they had to hold out till daylight, and they gradually, were putting groups of 100 or 200 men together with life rafts and floating nets and stuff like that. That they were able to keep them consolidated.
You know what their life jackets were called, don't you?
No, but
They were called Mae West.
oh yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah. Now, one of these stories talks about how when the guy is being rescued, he takes off his life jacket, and it sinks like a rock. he said it was the first time he realized he was holding up the life jacket instead of the other way around.
They were just cork with canvas over the top of it. So when it just
soaked with water, and it actually was
milkweed pods we used to collect when we were kids for the war.
They stuffed them in there?
That's what we thought they were for, was to make life jackets.
Could be. As they said a lot of things in those days.
Yeah, we didn't know.
So
a lot of stuff was just propaganda.
So then when I think of I'm Not a Hero, Longinus, right. Yeah. Right, and I've been collecting a lot of stories about these guys whose ships sank. I think I may have Kashiba's story, actually.
Probably do. You probably do. It's
of course, not all of them got in the papers. I mean, I'm realizing as talking to other people. I think it was Andy Budka told me his uncle. What the heck's his name? This is awful. I know the guy well. His wife was Irene. She used to be Ted Pollock. Remember Ted Pollock? He was big in the veterans groups around here. And he was the commissioner of elections for a while, the Democratic commissioner of elections. Andy thinks that Uncle Ted had ships shot out from under him in both theaters during the course of the war. They went over twice. But some of this stuff, my God! I mean, can you imagine those early U-boat sunk convoys in the North Atlantic in winter? As they're approaching, they got one guy approaching Iceland when the ship gets hit by. Holy God! I mean, how long are you going to last in the water under the best of circumstances?
You're not.
No.
And you know it.
You know it. 20 minutes.
Those guys just stuck with the ship. There was no other choice.
and even the guys who were serving on those subs, you know, when you see how cramped and small and noisy and dirty and oily and it was. I mean, the conditions, you know, these guys put up with. You know, even the same thing on our ships. There was no room.
Oh my Lord!
You know, you see a big ship out. There's like there wasn't. It was jam packed with everything because they needed to have stuff that was going to last.
Their bunks were about this far apart.
Oh yeah. And they'd be stacked like six up. Yeah.
If you were claustrophobic, you had a tough time.
And brutally hot below decks. Cy was on one of those escort carriers, which is it's the size of a Liberty ship because they were Liberty ships fitted out with flight decks, is what they were. And the Liberty ships weren't all that big, and we made thousands of them. But I forget how many planes. They had like 60 planes or something like that on this little carrier, and like a crew of 400 or 500. Holy mackerel!
Small cities.
Yeah. I mean, really crammed cities, you know. But he was on the flight deck crew, so he says we never slept in our bunks. He says we had a little spot just below the flight deck. There was a couple of stairs. It was like a mezzanine, and they'd go down there and take it. So they had fresh air all the time. Can you imagine being in the South Pacific with summer temperatures and you got 400 guys sleeping next to you? Jeez.
All their supplies were stored in there.
Oh yeah, food, and of course they were all diesel ships. And when you think of the supply lines that we managed to put together, it's absolutely unbelievable. I mean, we're fighting halfway around the world, fighting a war halfway around the world with supply lines that go back to California.
The logistics are incredible.
Fantastic.
What they had to go through.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Wow. Anyway, Guadalcanal. A couple of the Conti brothers were there. There was a fellow named Joseph Bucci, whose story I've yet to write, who was a huge hero there. Another guy was up, was given a commendation. He and two other guys did 8-hour shifts sitting on top of a radio mast at Henderson Field, I think, spotting artillery with no prior experience spotting artillery, but they'd be up there and our artillery would shoot and they'd tell them, no, you got to go a little left, a little to the right, whatever, not far enough. Yeah. And they would do this for days, you know. And at one point, one of the guys, for whatever reason, missed the shift, and the other guy was up there for. I couldn't think there was a battle going on. Is what it was. So the other guy's up there for 12 hours straight, or 16 hours straight, and doesn't complain. Wow. Bucci gets a Silver Star. And becomes one of these guys. Apparently he was fairly articulate, so he's going on these national radio programs telling about his adventures in Guadalcanal and raising bond drives.
A lot of those guys didn't like that, having to come back while...
Well, have you seen Flags of Our Fathers, the Clint Eastwood movie?
Yeah.
Just like that, you know. Yeah. Now, having seen that recently, great picture. Eastwood, what an artist he is with a camera. He did that Letters from Iwo at the same time from the Japanese point of view. And also a just tremendous picture.
Did not get nearly the accolades that it deserved.
Right. That was one of the best pictures I've ever seen, really. Anyway, I'm seeing that, Flags of Our Fathers, and then I'm writing up about, a good part of my book is about what happens at home. And one of the things that happens at home is these continual bond drives. And at one point, I think it's in late '42, Charles Lawton and Ann Rutherford come to town. Ooh. Captain Bligh, Ann Rutherford had a brief but glorious career at the MGM. She was a big star for a while.
Yeah, she's in-house star.
Anyway, they come to town and they speak from the front steps of the post office. There's like 4,000 or 5,000 people there. Of course, they block off Church Street, and everybody's there. Lawton gives this pep talk that reminded me of this, and he said, "I was recently in San Francisco for one of these bond drives, and I witnessed the most disgraceful thing I've ever seen in my life." And he talks about these guys coming from, these Marines that came from Guadalcanal, who, he said, were forced to make monkeys of themselves begging for money to fight the war. And his point was, what a disgrace that after everything we put these guys through, they have to beg us for the money to give them the supplies to fight the war. And it was a completely different perspective than one would expect, and very well put. And then you think about these poor guys with the flags of Iwo Jima and forced to recreate the Rosenthal picture, even though one of them wasn't even one of the guys who was in the picture.
Yeah. Well, there's always some sort of political angle to everything.
Oh my God! Yeah, it's a disgrace. And the Gamuka Flower Shop. Anybody remember where that was? I was trying to remember. I remember the name of the flower shop, but I don't remember where it was located.
No, I don't either.
Anyway, they donate this big bouquet of roses for Ann Rutherford, okay, to welcome her to Amsterdam.
It was on the East End.
I kind of think so too. But I can't picture where it was. Well, somebody will put it over my head. Actually, I've got the city directory from 1941. I should look it up, right?
You could.
Anyway, she decides on the spot, why don't I auction off these flowers to buy war bonds? The bidding started at $200. Now think of $200 in 1941 or 42 terms.
That was a lot of money.
It starts.
The one of the Shuttleworth boys down there.
That was like $2,000.
Yeah.
Now
more probably.
Yeah.
It finished at $10,000. Wow. She auctioned off those roses for $10,000 in war bonds.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That was a fortune. Wow. That was a fortune.
Oh, now, of course, I mean, it wasn't a donation of $10,000. It was it was an investment of $10,000. But nevertheless, I think that day they raised something like $60,000 just on the steps of the post office for the bond drive. And when you look at the amounts of money that were raised for these war bonds in a city this size, it is flabbergasting. I just posted on the Historic Amsterdam League page on Facebook the story of the two Polish bombers in 1944. The Polish Spirit of Amsterdam and the Amsterdam Avenger, I think, were the two.
But at that time, 42, you had numerous servicemen on every block in this city.
Oh yeah.
You had, the number of members of the armed forces that we sent who went from here, statistically from our population,
was everybody.
It's got to be.
It seems to me that
it's got to be unbelievable. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but it was.
Well, I'll tell you. Roughly, nobody knows the exact number, but there were contemporaneous accounts which seem to suggest that there were over 4,000 came from Amsterdam. Okay, this is a city that had a population of 35,000 men, women, and children of all ages. Right. So when you count the guys who were within the age group, it was everybody but those who couldn't went. It was everybody, every family. I mean, when you figure 88 Amsterdam High graduates were killed in the war, I roughly in my head one time I figured out that it was like when you really get right down to it, it was like It was like almost 10% of the graduating classes of that era were killed in the war. Killed, never mind wounded. There were plenty more wounded than were killed.
We had our.
It seems to me that whether my mind is going or what, but that we used to buy savings stamps.
Right, 10 cents a piece.
10 cents a piece.
That's right.
And once a week, everybody in our class would come in with our 10 cents, and we'd buy a savings stamp.
And then when you get so many, it became a savings bond.
Right.
Yeah. In the first month, less than the first month, the month of December 1941, is one I just came across a couple of days ago. The recorder paper boys would sell the bond stamps while they're collecting for the paper route. And
I never did that.
They sold, before January 1st, 42, they had already sold something like 59,000 stamps at 10 cents a piece. $5,900, something like that. But when you figure what that meant in those days, this was just the paper boys collecting. The Polish community came up with 750,000 just for those two planes, and we're talking about people who were working in the factories or had tiny little small businesses here. I mean, it wasn't like anybody was rolling in dough at that point. And a good chunk of that money was put up by the Polish bank, El Banco Polacco, as I used to call it in the East End. Seriously. But where did that money come from? From the same people, So it is just, and I found other indicated the previous month they raised well over $1 million just from the Polish working community. Holy God! We exceeded every bond goal there ever was in this city and county by far, and we were like number 5 county in the state per capita in just in war bond, and then the other stuff too in the scrap drives and the rubber and the metal. And there's a picture posted on Hal the other day of the old gun that used to be in the West End Park, and that was scrapped during World War II as part of the drive. Yeah. The metal doors at City Hall were taken down. The iron fence that surrounded City Hall was taken down and put in the scrap drive. People wonder whatever happened to that iron fence. That's what happened to it. Yeah. Tons and tons of stuff. One of the more amusing articles I found was they did a gambling raid and confiscated all these one-armed bandits, and they axed them to death and then threw them on the scrap heap. So there's a big article on doing our part. These gambling machines will soon be bullets fighting the Japs. But phenomenal how everybody got involved.
Yes. Yep.
And I think it was just, especially as you say, when every kid on every block was in the war, everybody who was left behind wanted to do something. Wanted to do something to help them.
It was not some remote story or a thing that they heard about. It was
everybody
from their sons.
Everybody pitched in one way or another.
Now, I mean, you were an odd age. You were way too young for the war. Did you have anybody in your family go?
My older brother.
Yeah. Where did he go?
He was on a hospital ship. He was in the boiler room.
In the boiler room of the hospital ship. I can't imagine what the boiler rooms must have been like. That had to be
like hell.
Wow. I bet you some of them were still coal operated in those days.
Some of the early ones, absolutely. They would have been.
I think his was.
Jeepers.
I think his was.
Wow. Anyway, I didn't see anything in the paper about Pearl Harbor services today. Were they having them, or have they finally done away with that?
I didn't see any in the paper.
See anything. The only thing they had the editorial today.
Yeah, it's a very short editorial. I didn't even read it. But it was very short.
Well, at least we still remember it somehow. It's an odd year. It's 71 years this year. But boy. Yeah, Uncle Si had his 90th birthday the other day. Just amazing. I mean, he's he was a kid aboard that USS Marcus Island.
He just turned 20, right?
You know, and I asked him last year on his 89th birthday. I said, "What was your favorite year?" You know, of course he thinks he's 32, but so he didn't have as much to choose from as he might have. But and he smiled and he said, "I think it was the year I was CPO, when he was Chief Petty Officer in charge of the flight deck crew on the Marcus Island."
That's a dangerous shop on the flight deck.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know whether it was me or one of the kids. When he was telling us the story of the kamikaze pilots, one went down on either side of the ship, and there were a couple of guys who were hurt from whatever the impact resulted in. Somebody said, "Weren't you scared? Weren't you scared, Uncle Si?" He said, "We were 21, 22 years old." He said, "We didn't know enough to be scared."
Yeah.
And it's flabbergasting when you think about it. 21, and he had just turned 22 when the kamikazes hit, and that was toward the end of his service. Yeah,
Well, these guys,
and he's you know, CPO at 21.
they're surviving on adrenaline out there and just doing what's got to get done and
Yeah,
expecting.
whatever needed to be done.
Yeah.
and they didn't even know what they were doing. Actually, he said they'd get up. You know, in Leyte Gulf particularly, they would be out launching planes before the sun came up. Okay, and then they'd rest for a few hours, and then they'd come back and they'd refuel them, send them out again. And he didn't know till years later even what they were doing. And in Leyte Gulf, they were. That's when they were hugely outnumbered by the Japanese fleet. They'd split our guys in two with a decoy move, and all of a sudden they just came out in force, and it was just sheer tenacity that we won that battle. These little escort ships would send out the planes, and they would just attack, as like little mosquitoes. The USS Johnston, a destroyer, has a range far shorter than these cruisers and battleships they're facing. So they just went right in, knowing that they were going to get hit and destroyed, but they go in with guns a-blazing, back and forth, just plowing the Japanese ships at point-blank range until finally the Japanese figured they were outnumbered. And they were vast, you know. If they had just kept on going, they would have destroyed the landing forces going into Leyte in the Philippines.
You know, you're talking about the supply lines. It's huge. When you take a look at the globe and you see the distances, and every drop of fuel and every crumb of food,
and every
these guys had to get moved from here to there.
Yeah.
And they had to perpetually go back and get more because these ships could only spend so long out there. They only carry so much fuel for the planes. They had to go back and refuel, and it just constant all over again. You know, you see these movies on, you know, even on, you know, they're doing the assaults on the land with the soldiers. You know, you see them there, but you got to really remember everything they needed had to take with them. You know, and it had to be supplied to them over.
And the Japanese lines were a lot shorter.
Yeah,
it's like playing. In a way, it's like playing football. You know, once you get within that red zone, the defense is a hell of a lot stronger.
Yeah.
Because they don't have as much territory to cover.
They had no territory to get their stuff down.
Somewhere I've got a Reader's Digest Atlas of the Globe, I think it's in that book, and there's a picture. I think they call it Waterworld, and it's a map of a portion of the globe that includes the Pacific, where virtually everything is water. I mean, it's almost half the globe is the Pacific Ocean, and all you got is the rim of land, and the rest is just
you just tip it right, and that's all you got. Yeah. Wow. And the islands weren't big.
No,
they weren't.
No,
they weren't big at all.
To the water.
All right, that's us remembering Pearl Harbor, folks, as we did the Alamo, and that's it for this hour. And the second hour, we're probably going to go into more mundane stuff, but at least once a year, this stuff should be remembered. I'm Bob Going with Jim Nakosha and Gavin Murdoch, and we'll be back shortly with more of the show with no name.